Hey guys, hope you're having a good Monday. I'm actually getting this video up on time this week. It's Monday afternoon, just barely. It's kind of rainy outside. If you were to look out my window right now, we had a downpour just a little bit ago, maybe an hour ago. Kind of weird. I was just on campus this morning and it was beautiful, sunny, and now it's rainy. But you know what? I'll take it. It means I don't have to water my grass today. So this week's video, we're getting into some new things this week, starting with our first actual essay assignment. Now that we've had a chance to get into Ragged Dick quite a bit more, I'd say we're about halfway, just about halfway through at the end of this week we just finished, where we have 2 more weeks. We're working on the reading of it and then finishing out that section of our class. So what we'll do is we've been doing in our past week's videos, our check-ins, and we'll start with looking at what you guys did last week. So the blog responses asked you to start thinking towards what we're going to do for our first essay, and that's a passage explication. So we introduced that idea last week of working with a text and doing basically a literary analysis, but on a very specific part of it. So I asked you all to look for a passage anywhere from pages 1 to 99, because that's where it gotten up to last week. 2 to 4 paragraphs, and I asked you to go ahead and try out the passage explication. Gave you some links, gave you some details there. So looking over those, there were quite a few of you, actually there was quite a variety in the different passages we chose, but interestingly enough, everyone seemed to have a similar theme. And a lot of those were building off of course, the themes that we had covered so far. The appearance theme and the coming of age or character development theme. So running over what I've jotted down here, we had someone who went with the very last scene where Dick discovers his bank book is missing, and how the money was not just important for him because it was money, but it was symbolic of his now having something more important in his life and developing past his idea of living in the day-to-day. Now he was able to save up, so that bank book really became important, and we'll see what happens with that in this week's reading. We had someone bring up the scam artist with the wallet that was dropped, and I have to get this back to the owner, but I have a train to catch. Here, I'll give it to you for $20 and all that kind of stuff. And it was quite interesting, this passage actually. The person who looked at it brought up the idea of this was not just a character development moment for Dick, but it was a character development moment for Frank, where Dick was teaching Frank some street smarts, and Frank was given the opportunity to recognize that there's more to Dick than meets the eye. He may not be book smart, intelligent in the academic upper class kind of way that Frank is, but Frank is definitely lacking in the street smarts that Dick does have. He's lived on the street most of his life, so he has this awareness of who's swindling him and who's to be trusted. One really popular one, and it was viewed a couple different ways here, was the 2 sets of clothes scene, where Dick had a choice of, once he got that suit from Frank and his uncle, he had the choice of putting those new clothes back on the next day or wearing his old clothes. And it was a truly symbolic moment of old Dick versus new Dick. And I'm trying to get my hands up in here. I like to talk with my hands. The old clothes where Dick's was the way that Dick had been before, where he would spend his money quickly, where he smoked and drank and did all the bad things. In that one passage we had the list of the bad characteristics for Dick, where the author says he does all these bad things, but really he's a good person in the overall thing. But the old clothes symbolized his old self. The new clothes was the newly developing Dick. It's a really interesting in-between moment for that one, because we know that Dick hasn't completely shed his old self, and he hasn't completely taken on his new self. So the clothes become really symbolic of that, and a lot of you were picking up on that one as well. Several of you are getting into the verbal structure, the way, the word choice, how a sentence was structured to be read fast or to give off a certain kind of meaning. But the other thing with the clothes was the idea of the big feeling. That was part of that passage too, where Dick didn't want to, another phrase, put on airs. He didn't want to pretend to be something more than he was. And someone used a word I really like, and this is going to play into something for this week's assignments, actually. This is Natasha, talks about Alger, this is from her blog. Alger takes a rather didactic tone, assuring his readers that his sense of pride and big feeling, Dick's sense of pride and big feeling, is a character trait that can be identified amongst people of all walks of life, young, old, rich, or poor. It's something we can all relate to, however, it is something that should not burden Dick's ambition. This is a moment when you really see the gentleman's handbook idea of the novel. So we're going to be focusing on that this week, and I'll leave that for a little later in this video. And then a few of us kind of rehash the outward appearance versus inward character idea. Let's see here. Another one about the intended audience of the book, the intended purpose, came from Mark. Mark said, Horatio Alger's writing does not graphically impart the abuses or tribulations a child on the street would have suffered. In fact, his storytelling style in this book appears to capture a sense of innocent adventure amongst ragamuffins who happen to be homeless and without parents. So the wording and how things were written, and the fact that this was a kind of, here's what you should be doing, but let me tell you about it in a story, really tell you about who this book was meant for. Let's see, do we have any other ones here? Again, the outward appearance. Frank learns not to judge Dick by his outward appearance. His attitude towards Dick really changes when someone mentioned a passage where he offers to teach Dick how to read if he were to have stayed in the city, which he doesn't. But you get that rehashing of the outward appearance versus inward character. The clothes are symbolic of character development. And then a few of you touched on, again, what I'm going to be working on, what we'll work on this week, to be who is this novel meant for, and how do some of these passages demonstrate that to us. So really good job on those blog responses. Everyone was really thorough with your close reading. I was very, very pleased with these. And I don't perceive you all having a hard time going from that smaller passage explication to what we'll start this week with the actual writing of our first essay. It's going to be essentially the same thing, just a full essay size version of it, and I'll discuss that in a little bit. Your videos were really interesting. So one thing I liked about this particular topic, I don't see a lot of movies, honestly. I go to the movies maybe once or twice a year. It's expensive, and to me it's more of a treat, even just watching a movie at home. Unless it's on TV, I don't generally watch movies. I don't have Netflix. I have cable. So hearing about some of these movies from you guys, a lot of them I hadn't seen, and a few I've seen a long time ago. So to list them off, we had The Sandlot, Matilda, Percy Jackson, Mean Girls, Star Wars Episode 7, and The Blind Side was mentioned in the same post, even though that wasn't your main idea. Someone didn't give me the name of their film, but mentioned it was the Manny Pacquiao story. There was a novel, because you had that option too, The Forgotten Soldier, I think was the title. Juno, and then Leon the Professional. So I really enjoyed getting to hear what these films were about and how you saw them having the same coming of age story. The one thing with the videos, some of you got so caught up in that, telling me what the film was about, and everyone reached generally the 5-minute mark this week, or this past week, but you got so caught up in telling me what the film was about that you forgot to give yourself time to discuss how Ragged Dick comes into it. I think out of the, how many of you responded this week? I think there were 3 or 4 who didn't get their videos up. So out of the about 12 or so, less than half of you ever got back around to talking about Ragged Dick. And if you did, most of you maybe gave it 30 seconds. And 4 minutes and 30 seconds was dedicated to just plot summary of your film or novel. So I did put a warning on this week's post to make sure that you are reading and addressing the entire prompt, whether it be for the video or the blog, because otherwise you're kind of giving away some free points, essentially. I don't grade these super harshly, but if you are answering, if you're answering only part of the prompt, it's definitely cause for why you might be losing some points. And so the grades are, the grade book is set up. I'm going to post the grades for the last 2 weeks today, and week 1 will be going up soon. I just have to go back through and read some of those. I did read them all, I just didn't get the grades written down. So the videos were not quite as successful as the blog post this week, even though they were quite entertaining. Or last week. So this week we're going to make that a focus to make sure that we answer all the prompts, all the questions that go along with the entire assignment. So this week we got 3 things going on. We have our regular assignments, our video and our blog, and then we've got essay number 1. You're going to be working on your first draft. And generally we're going to be doing a first draft and a final draft with a peer review in between. So I'll talk about that last because I want to allow some time to really discuss what you're doing for that and how it's going to work. But our regular assignments, if we go and look at our web page, there we go. Those went up last night, and I did post one thing and then changed it. I had posted the topic that is currently your, where was it? It was your, no, it is your blog response, and I had originally posted it for your video, or the other way around. I can't remember what I did. So if you'd subscribed to our page and got the update in your email, things might have gotten moved around, so just make sure that you go and double check those things. So for our, let me check which one this is. For our video response, for our video response this week, we're looking at one of the main ideas of the American dream. We are, again, focusing on that as our theme for the class and looking at where some of these ideals that are part of the American dream come from. So this week we're focusing on the idea of the Protestant work ethic. So if you look that up, you just look up Protestant work ethic, you're going to get a definition something like what you see on the blog page. It's the value attached to hard work, thrift, and efficiency in one's worldly calling, which, especially in the Calvinist view, were deemed as signs of an individual's election or eternal salvation. Essentially, the Protestant work ethic is the idea that by working hard and saving money, you are going to be looked upon with favor, and they would be viewed as a sign of success. So it seems simple, except when you look at the Encyclopedia Britannica thing, you get this part about the Calvinist view, and that's where it gets kind of complicated. So I tried to give you some history on that in the actual blog post. Sorry, the video post. And I gave you some links. It's a bit of a complicated idea. So the Protestant work ethic evolved out of Calvinism, which evolved out of Lutheranism. Martin Luther with his 95 Theses, not Martin Luther King, right? Martin Luther. So Martin Luther developed a Protestant Reformation, right? He said, I don't agree with how we're worshiping God. Here's my ideas on how we should change it. And he had a contemporary, a guy who was living at the same time, named John Calvin, who liked his ideas. John Calvin liked Martin Luther's ideas, but he wanted to add to them. So he came along. Martin Luther had the idea that what you do, the work you do on this earth, is a duty that benefits you as an individual and society as a whole. And he changed that from the Catholic idea where good works, or the work that you do on this earth, whether it be your job or doing good for others, Catholicism believes that good works are an obligation. Good works were something that were tied to your faith. You did good works because you believed in God. Because you believed in God, you did good works. Right? They were tied together. But Martin Luther said that good works, doing good on this earth, and essentially your job and what you did for your job were a sign of grace, that you had found favor with God. And then Calvin came along and created Calvinism. And he said that not only were good works something that were a sign that you had found favor with God, but that they showed you were a chosen one. With Calvinism, there's this idea that before you are born, or when you're born, God has already decided whether you are going to heaven or going to hell. It doesn't matter what you do in your life. You can be a horrible person, but if you are chosen, you are an elect is the term that they use, then you would go to heaven regardless. That's a complicated idea in and of itself, because then you can be a horrible person and still go to heaven. It's hard to get your mind around, but that was the idea of Calvinism, that there are certain people who are chosen, and no matter what they do, they're going to heaven. And so the catch, though, is that no one would know who was an elect. You didn't know if you were an elect. Your sister, your brother, your neighbor, your cousin, your person who lives across town doesn't know if you're an elect. So the only way you could know if this were possible was by observing someone's way of life. And so tied to that was the idea that hard work and frugality are two outward signs of the elect. So people who held to Calvinism, this type of Protestantism, were drawn to these qualities and tried to achieve them throughout their life. So the idea then, how this ties to the American dream, the Protestant work ethic was central to the idea of the self-made man, right? So when we're talking about the American dream, lots of times we reference our forefathers, Washington, Jefferson, and then Ben Franklin is one of the main ones here. He was seen as a self-made man, inventor, smart guy, wise, right? Everyone wanted his help with things. So this became really central to the American dream, that success was important, but it was success that you made yourself, not by getting handouts, not by using connections or doing things in order to be rewarded, right? It was you pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you get this done. We definitely see this in Ragged Dick, right? There's a scene that someone did mention in the blogs last week where Mr. Whitney is trying to give Dick money. And he refuses it at first. He says, no, I don't accept handouts. I didn't really do anything to deserve it. And Mr. Whitney says, you're right, but I I was a friendless youth as well. And without others helping or giving me encouragement, I would not be where I am today. And he talks about his path and how he is a self-made man. And so you can almost guess that we're going to see Dick kind of follow a similar pattern of he's now been given this encouragement from other people. And that was something you guys all brought up in your videos too. The films and the books that you had read, always with that coming of age story, part of the development was due to the main character having the right influences in their life. So for Dick it was the same. He meets Frank and Mr. Whitney, and something changes in him. He starts to become a different person because of their influence. So we're going to be looking at these ideas of the self-made man, the Protestant work ethic, and Calvinism in terms of the idea of success. So your prompt this week, if you look at the page for the video response, is, do Americans still believe that you can make yourself into anything you want to be? What are examples of this rags to riches philosophy in contemporary society? Think of politicians, sport heroes, Hollywood stars, Survivor, the TV show, and makeover shows on TV. What do we value in the self-made man or woman? Do we value ethical behavior, accomplishments, celebrity status? Do Americans believe that good luck is a shortcut to success? And in the book, this is a really central idea when we get the story not of Dick Hunter, as you'll learn his last name is in this next section of reading, but Dick Whittington. Frank, in our reading this past week, Frank tells Dick the story of Dick Whittington, who collected the needles and then had the opportunity to send something on a ship to the New World, and he sent his cat, and his cat ended up killing all the rats on an island, and the king said thank you and all that stuff, right? That was the story of a self-made boy, right? He's not a man in that story, but you can see that come out there. So I'm not necessarily asking you to think about the story per se this week. I'm asking you to think about the idea in general. Should you want to tie it back to the story, go for it, right? It's always good to tie things back to what we're reading, but I'm not asking you that in your prompt this week. I want you to think about, in contemporary society, celebrities, politicians, famous people in general who are well known for their story of coming from nothing and turning into something. So think about those questions I put on the video response page, and I do really encourage you to look at some of the resources I posted for you. I got 3, the Encyclopedia Britannica page. There's a great video that was put together I found online that sums up Calvinism and the Protestant work ethic and ties them together. So definitely check that one out. They're at the end of the video response this week. And one person already posted. All right. Your blog response is actually bringing up something that I've been talking about the past few weeks. We're going to be looking at our craft of research book for our blog this week. Chapter 2 is on your reading, and you're going to be looking at audience awareness, how to connect with your reader. And I'll give you a warning that a lot of what you're reading in here is not going to seem very useful till we get to that 3rd essay. But I don't want to make you read, half of this book when we get to that last unit for us. So we're going to be reading bit by bit, and we'll try to make it relevant to what we're reading with the other texts. But really, it's going to seem disconnected until we get to Fast Food Nation. But this week we can make a connection with talking about audience awareness. It's really important to know who you're writing for various reasons. So I list some of them on the prompt or the blog page this week. it can help you figure out, working with source material, whether a piece of information is credible. You can consider how sources that you use might be viewed by the audience of the piece that you're writing. You can become more aware of bias. I used to work in a library in college, and whenever they did an information literacy presentation, they always showed this one page for Martin Luther King. I think it's martinlutherking.org. I'm checking to be sure. Yes, martinlutherking.org. So if you ever get bored one day and want to check that out, you go to that page and it looks kind of funny, and you click around. It's got things like rap lyrics and negative things about Martin Luther King, and if you do some digging, you'll find that it's actually sponsored by a white pride organization. So just because a source is out there doesn't mean that it's any good, and sometimes its bias is all-consuming and would make it a completely invaluable source for certain purposes. So some of those are more important for your writing, right? When you're writing a research paper, to be aware of source material and things like that. An awareness of the audience also influences how you write, the words you choose. If you know that you're writing to a fairly knowledgeable audience, you're not going to need to waste a lot of time describing things to them. You can get straight to the point. Versus the other way, you're going to have to describe more if they don't have as much knowledge. It can also change, audience awareness also comes into play with knowing the purpose of why you're writing. So with any kind of expository writing, there are three purposes. There's persuasive, there's informative, and there's expressive. So you're writing to influence their opinion on something, to just tell them about something in general, or to mess with their emotions or entertain them in some way. So all of those things come into play, and I meant to have a little whiteboard here, but there's a thing called the rhetorical triangle. So at one point you have you, the speaker. At another point, I can't wiggle that part, at another point you have the subject you're talking about, and your last point is your audience. And all of those are connected and influence each other. Who your audience is going to affect what you say and how you write, and it's going to change how much information for that subject you have to give. And you can see how all the relationships might work. So what I'm asking you to do, and I'm wordy again, what I'm asking you to do for this week's blog post then is to think about audience awareness by finding some kind of thing that you read this week. So anything that's not for our class. If you're reading for another class, sure, you can use that. But nothing from Ragged Dick and nothing from the Craft of Research. I would hope you might do some reading purely for your own purposes, not for school. But if not, you can choose one of those. So things I suggest are magazine articles, newspaper articles, BuzzFeed listicles, Facebook posts, Twitter posts. Give us a brief summary of what it is you've read, and then reflect on who the writer of the piece might have been trying to write to. Who is their imagined audience? And I give you some questions to think about and answer in your blog post. So again, make sure you answer all of these. What kind of publication is this? Is it a trade journal, a popular magazine, scholarly journal, a entertainment website, an entertainment magazine, anything? Who publishes this thing? I've got to change the phrasing on that. Who publishes this piece of writing? Is it commercial, a nonprofit? Is it someone just writing a blog? Who is the intended audience? Right? This is up to you to guess on. There really is no right or wrong answer, but you're going to need to be able to back this up with number 4. How did you decide who the audience is? Did the author make certain choices that led you to this conclusion? Is the magazine, newspaper, websites, etc., itself targeted at a certain audience, right? An article in People magazine might be targeted at the same audience that the whole magazine itself is targeted towards. BuzzFeed might be targeted at a certain age group. Is that particular BuzzFeed listicles targeted at an even more specific age group? What is the purpose of the publication? Persuasive, informative, expressive? How are readers expected to use it? What types of articles and regular features does this publication include? And does this publication seem to have a particular political orientation? Does it advance a particular cause? This is the bias question, and explain. And then with the last part, so don't do like last week on your videos where you forgot to do the last part. Last part is to tie this to Ragged Dick by discussing who you think Alger's intended audience was. I can think of at least two, and you can't try to be as specific as possible. Don't just say he was targeting kids. Is he targeting boys? Is he targeting girls? Is he targeting teens? Is he targeting 5-year-olds, right? Be as specific as possible. Age, gender, socioeconomic class, and those kind of things. And then I put a reminder there to answer the entirety of the prompt and not to leave anything out. So that's your basic weekly assignments, and then the one we're adding on is our first official essay. So I tried to post a link to the essay assignment on Laulima. I think it works, but honestly, I can't know for sure. So if there's an issue with this, please let me know. But know that the assignment is posted on Laulima. On the assignments tab, you will find there both an assignment sheet and a rubric. So you know exactly what I'm going to be looking for when grading. So this first essay is 3 to 5 pages. We start small and we'll work up to our longer research paper at the end of the term. With the rough draft being due, I'm keeping this general, being due next week, week 5, okay? And I'm keeping it general because I'm going to allow you to officially finish your rough draft whenever you want, but know that it needs to be done with time for you to get a peer workshop done. I am not asking you to officially submit a rough draft, except your official submission would be completing that peer review and showing or getting feedback for it. And so we'll have some way of me knowing what kind of feedback. I'm likely going to ask you to fill out, or I'm going to incorporate that into the assignments next week. Maybe ask you in your blog to tell me about your peer workshop experience. Was it useful, not useful, or something like that. And then the final draft of this essay is going to be due on October 1st by midnight. So it'll be part of our regular Saturday midnight deadlines. And that's, I want to say that's 2 weeks from this Saturday. So just over 3 weeks you got. Yeah, 2 weeks from this Saturday. So just under 3 weeks actually to work on this. And really, if you did that blog response with the explication, if you want to use any of that, you are absolutely welcome to. So I won't read what's on that assignment page, but know that it's essentially a full-blown essay style version of that smaller explication you did. So I'm expecting an introduction that has more of an argument over, I'm going to be looking for passages that support this theme or this argument or whatever. So the idea is you start with an argument. I want to pull, if you look at some of the topics, I want to argue that Ragged Dick was written for an audience of preteen boys in general, not just those living on the streets, but also those from better backgrounds. And then you're going to go through the story and pull passages that show that this could be the audience. And you can pull long passages, you can pull sentences, anything you want. But they need to there needs to be a direct connection to the argument that you're creating. Let's see. So, 3 So you'll have an intro that has your argument. Your body paragraphs will have the support of that argument, and your conclusion, of course, if you've written essays most of your life, your conclusion repeats the argument that you're making and summarizes it in terms of all that you've already discussed. So I give you 3 ideas for your essay, and I am open to either slight tweaks of these topics, or if you have another idea that you think would make for a great essay and you want to go off in that direction, shoot me an email and make a proposal. And, by that I just mean, how's this for a possible essay topic? But the 3 that I give you, like I just did the example, the first one is the audience. Who was the book written for? In order to think about this question, consider Ragged Dick's rise from bootblack to young gentleman. Hopefully, spoiler alert, that didn't mess anything up for you. How much of his progress was due to his personal qualities and actions, and how much was due to the support of wealthy gentlemen? So how much is luck and how much is actual hard work? Your second option, it's raining again, pretty good. Second option is what's in a name. So it's really interesting to trace character development by looking at all the names Dick has in the story. He starts off as, if you go way back, young vagabond, and then Dick, or Ragged Dick, Dick Hunter, and then he gets Richard Hunter Esquire in the final page of the book. And so what do all of those names symbolize for his development, and how can you trace that through the book? And then the last one is tying in with this week's video response. I keep getting them confused, so just check the website for that. Ties in with this week's response to the Protestant work ethic. So I ask you to think about how the Protestant work ethic operates in the story. Does a hard work ethic guarantee Dick's success? And if not, what else did he need to help him become upwardly mobile? So choose one of those 3 or create one of your own, but clear it with me first. And then compose an essay on it. And so this week we're going to work on a rough draft. So I'd like you to have it ready. It would be great if you guys wrote it and had it ready by next Monday, Sunday, something like that. I would say no later than Wednesday. And then I will be posting a list of pairings for the peer workshops. And I believe we're actually at an even number of 14, so there should be straight up pairings, no groups of 3 or anything. I'll post your emails, and you guys can exchange with each other, and I'll have a list of like questions you need to answer for the peer workshops, in addition to any other comments you might want to give to each other. But these will be electronic kind of workshopping things, so my biggest suggestion to you is, if you have a Mac or you're someone who doesn't have Microsoft Office, I think I mentioned this in the very first video, that you can get Microsoft Office, the Microsoft Office suite, for free if you go to Office for Education. So if you just type that into Google or a search engine, it'll take you to their website. You put in your UH email and you'll be able to download copies of the entire Office suite for free. So you can get Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Publisher, whatever else there might be out there. So many things that sometimes I don't even use them. But you can use the track changes and commenting features on Microsoft Word. It makes it super easy. Or if it's even easier for you guys, you can share them as Google Docs if you are someone who uses that platform. And then you can even make a choice if you want to talk on the phone while you're going through each other's essays, and you can make comments and see what's being done in real time. So any way that's going to work for you. I'm not going to force it on you, but I would suggest one of those 2 ways, just because it's easier to keep track of who said what and what they're referencing and all that. So work on that this week. I forgot to mention your reading. We already mentioned Chapter 2 in Craft of Research. Ragged Dick, we are reading through, I think it was 149. We keep having these really nice, almost 50-page sections. Yeah, so 100 to 149, and then we'll finish it up next week. And so we'll see where Dick's story takes him this time around. And I look forward to seeing your responses, your video responses, your blog responses, and I'm really excited to get started on our first official essay. I hope you guys are ready for it. Okay, so have a great week. Hopefully it's a little better weather where you are, though I really like rain, so I'm not complaining. And I will see you in next week's video. Have a good one, guys.